welcome back once again to After the Credits. So, did it again, recorded a whole episode without my mic on. I don't know why my mic keeps getting turned off, but it does, and I really need to fix that. If nothing else, I'll just go back to recording through the camera audio, because looking back at the Spider-Man video, it was fine. Then again, you never know what's going to change on that to where one day it's fine and one day you can't hear me. Anyway, today we're talking about Valerian, finally. Yep, it came back to the theater. We had it for like 2 weeks. They dropped it for like a week, and then they brought it back. So I think there was some other big event that they had to kind of shoehorn in there somewhere. And the only way they could fit it in was to drop Valerian for a little bit. But it came back, so I get to review it now. So what did I think of Valerian? Well, it was more eventful than The Dark Tower, but at the same time, not as interesting as I thought it was going to be. Again, I believe this is based off a young adult novel of some sort, and it's really obvious when watching the movie that they're trying to play up to that specific audience. But at the same time, I see where there was potential for a better movie in here. It just didn't really translate well, I guess. So the movie opens with man's first exploration into space, walking on the moon, blah, blah, blah. Then we cut to following the Cold War when American and Russian astronauts docked their ships together for the first time and had like a joint venture in space. Then we cut to the International Space Station. And then we start fast forwarding through the different years where every time we make peace with another nation, they join us up on the space station and dock a ship to us. So it's just exponentially growing as each nation comes together, which confuses me a little bit because all these ships stay on the station, but then it's like, okay, these people don't just stay on the station all the time. They're going back and forth between Earth and the station. So one of those ships would have to leave at some point and then come back, but it makes it seem like they just, once they're there, they stay there. So finally we get all the nations of Earth together, and then aliens show up. And they're like, hey, can we dock here too? Let's make peace. So we accept the alien race in with no conflict whatsoever. Surprise. Because it's Earth, and usually we instantly go into conflict with any alien species that arrives on our planet, according to movies. So this one works out, so then any other alien species that show up, we accept them as well. And basically it just becomes this big utopian society of all these different alien races coming together, joining their technologies and sciences and whatever understanding of the universe they have, and making a better life for everyone. Well, then at one point, the space station has gotten so big, its orbit is starting to decay and it's going to crash into the Earth. So NASA launches a bunch more rockets up to it that attach onto it and propel it away, breaking it out of Earth's gravitational pull, and just kind of jetting it off into space. And it's like, okay, you're on your own now. Go explore the universe, whatever, bye. And it's like, did you ask these people if they'd be okay with that before you just jettison them away from their home planet and, their families and whatever? And so they're just off floating through space now, meeting more alien races, expanding more and more and more, until they just kind of stabilize somewhere in the galaxy and become this giant metallic Cybertron-looking planetoid almost that basically houses all these different races and species and whatever else. So once that story is established, we cut over to this other utopian planet that are kind of primitive, but at the same time have a level of technology. But their entire planet basically looks like a beach of Hawaii almost, except like cartoonishly, like almost like what people think a beach on Hawaii would look like if that's all it was the beach. Like the entire island was just the beach and didn't have civilization or businesses or mountain ranges or anything like that. It was just all beach all the time. So these aliens are living on their planet in peace, no worries in the world, nothing. And then a bunch of shit starts raining down from the sky. And you quickly see that it's not asteroids that are like raining down to destroy their planet. It's what appears to be chunks of a spaceship. And you're like, okay, is this the space station? Did it like break up and crash into their planet? What's going on? No, it's not, because we come back to that later. But basically their entire planet is devastated by this craft crashing into their planet. And as the pieces are crashing down, everyone kind of gathers into one to investigate it. And the door ends up sealing behind them, so now they're stuck inside this spaceship. Except for the princess, who was still outside but was running up to join everyone else inside the spaceship when the door closed and she was stuck outside. And that's when the big mega piece of whatever came down, crashed into the world and destroyed everything, including her. And apparently, as the species dies, if they die in a traumatic way, they can expel their soul out into the universe, and it'll find what they deem to be a worthy host that will eventually come back to the planet and kind of set things right, I guess, is the way they kind of explained it. So she expels her soul out into the universe, which comes to Valerian. So then we follow Valerian around for a while. Him and his partner, whose name I can't remember. I'm going to call her Madam Eyebrows, because like everyone in this movie has like huge eyebrows, and that's all I can really remember about her. I'm sure I'll think of her name at some point, but for now she's Madam Eyebrows. So they're supposed to be a major and a lieutenant, I guess, in the military at this point, but they both look like they're 12 years old, but it's implied that they're in a romantic relationship with each other. So I think it's more implied that they're in their early 20s, but just the actors themselves seem fairly young, like they, compared to everyone else in the movie who's like really old and should be playing these parts probably. They just seem like really youngly cast, and so it's kind of off-putting at first, like how old exactly are they if they're in a sexual relationship? And it makes it a little awkward, but I'd say they're supposed to be in their 20s. So we follow them on this mission where they go recover this item, and then they take it back to the City of 1,000 Planets, which is the space station that was originally jettisoned from Earth. And they turn in the item to the general, but they decide that they're going to hold on to it for safety purposes just until things kind of blow over because they kind of suspect something's going on, which is kind of set up when they're going after this item in the first place. So of course their instincts were right, and the general gets kidnapped because the people who kidnapped him think that he has this item that they went to recover. So then Valerian's going to go after the general to try and recover him, and his partner's like, well, if you go after him, won't they just capture you? Because they'll know that you have the item once they realize he doesn't have it. And he's like, yeah, that's why I'm leaving it with you. So now she has the item. So then Valerian's off trying to save the general and disappears. So now his partner goes off to find him. So that's the next 30 minutes of the movie is let's rescue Valerian. So he's not even really the main focus of the movie. And really that's kind of the same way through the whole thing. Like Valerian, even though it's named after him, he seems to be secondary character in his own movie to his lieutenant. And I don't know, it's just, to me, she came off more as the main character because we follow a lot more of her than we do Valerian or anything else. So she goes off to save Valerian, and like the next 35, 40 minutes or so of the movie is her saving him. We finally find him, they're reconnected, and then she gets kidnapped. So now Valerian's off to save her, and in order to save her, he needs help from this other character that we now meet, who's played by Rihanna, who actually ends up being a lot more interesting of a character than I would have gave Rihanna credit for. And it was just kind of interesting the way her dynamic would have played out had she continued in the series, because for the first time in the movie you kind of see the hinted at Valerian playboy lifestyle, because it's set up early on in the movie that Madam Eyebrows won't take Valerian seriously in a relationship because he has a history with women, kind of like a Captain Kirk sleeping around with everyone type of thing. You know, Valerian keeps telling her, no, you're different, you're the one I've always been looking for, and she's like, well, how do you know? You never stay with anyone long enough to get to know them. He's like, well, I've stayed with you this long, you know, so he's kind of like serious about her, but she doesn't believe him. But they do nothing to establish that he's this playboy other than mention it right there. But then we meet this other character who happens to be female. Is the first time you kind of experience his playboy lifestyle. And it's not so much that he's a playboy as he just asks her for help and he's nice to her. So she kind of goes along with it, and she kind of takes an interest in him. And he doesn't really reciprocate it, but he doesn't shy away from it either. But she enters the picture as this third character, and she's actually probably the most interesting character in the whole film and has like the most backstory and setup to who she is. And it's like, oh, this could be interesting to see where this is going to go moving forward, because now you have Valerian, Madam Eyebrows, who he's supposedly in love with, and now there's this third character who's like the female best friend, and is it going to get in the way of the relationship, and how is it going to play out with the two girls liking or hating each other? And it seems like she'd be a really good third dynamic to the film, but she doesn't stick around that long. Spoiler, by the way, once we rescue Madam Eyebrows, the new character dies. So it's like, oh, we got this interesting character finally who we've developed this backstory for and got to know so much about in such a short time, and now she's gone. So it's like, you introduce a character just to get rid of him, and it was kind of pointless. And speaking of pointless, that brings me to the other aliens on the City of 1,000 Planets that captured Madam Eyebrows, who, I want to say her name is Lorelei. I think that sounds right, because I'm trying to like replay Valerian saying a name throughout the movie a lot. And I want to say it's Lorelei, but I could be wrong. So I'm either going to call her Lorelei or Madam Eyebrows. So if you get confused, they're the same person. But these aliens that captured her live on the space station, but they don't like humans. They don't allow humans in their sector because there's different sectors on the space station now, which is kind of obvious because some of them are aquatic, so you'd have an aquatic area for them. Some of them live in extreme cold, so you would have a cold region for them. Some are in extreme heat. Some are just like living technology. So you have like this whole circuitry area, you have a crystalline area, whatever, for all these different alien types. And these aliens exist on the space station, but they don't like humans, even though it's originally a human space station. So why would you come here if you don't like humans? They don't allow humans in their area without an escort. And from the look of it, they eat humans as a delicacy because the king of this alien species is about to eat Madame Eyebrows. So Valerian breaks in and causes an international incident by going in there as a human and rescuing Lorelei. And it's like this whole big thing, and it's like, well, why were these guys allowed to stay here? Just because we wanted their technology? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. So it just seems odd that this species exists on this beacon of a utopian society where everyone gets along and everyone shares their knowledge and technology, that you would have one offset like this. So Valerian rescues her, blah, blah, blah. Rihanna's character dies, spoiler. Then we go back after the general, which we finally find, and we find out the secret all along is supposedly there was a radiation leak in the center of the station, and that's what they needed this item that Valerian captured earlier for. But then they kept saying that this other people that were coming after were trying to use it as a weapon, and blah, 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 whatever the stupid story they came up with was. So then as we go on, we hear that this radiation leak in the center of the space station, every time they sent someone down there to investigate, they didn't come back alive, blah, blah, blah. So then Valerian goes there and he's like, wait, we're in the center of the space station. There should be high levels of radiation here and we're fine. So what's the deal? And he finds out that the species from the planet where the princess had died earlier but sent his memories off into the universe and ingrained themselves into his mind, that entire species is now living in the center of the space station. And the reason the general was trying to kill them off is he was responsible for destroying their homeworld, didn't know that any of them survived, and now that he knows that some of them are there, he wants to kill them off so they can't reveal his dirty secret. And the whole thing is, they've kind of forgiven him for it and moved on since then because it happened like 30 years ago. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. It took 30 years for this psychic wave to finally hit Valerian. So in the infinite vastness of the universe, there was no other species at any earlier time that was worthy of this princess's memories until Valerian rolled along. So at this point, I'm kind of wondering if it's that he was worthy of her memories or that his life path was going to take him in this direction. And that's what the princess latched onto because this was going to resolve her story and give her closure. Which it seems like that's a lot more of what was actually going on than what they actually explained was going on. So Valerian kind of outs the general that, you did this to these people, you knew the planet was inhabited, you fought your war over top of it anyway, and you basically destroyed their planet. Oh, by the way, how they ended up surviving is all the ones that were inside that spaceship when the planet exploded. Apparently the explosion just sent that piece of the spaceship out and floating into space. And over time, the ones who were on that ship who survived managed to learn how the technology works and rebuild the ship and traveled across the universe to the City of a Thousand Planets where they kind of crashed at that point and were just living in the center of the space station unbeknownst to anybody. So yeah, Valerian kind of outs the general and basically recognizes him as a war criminal. And the other race that is like, despite your hatred for us, we forgave you a long time ago and we moved on. The only reason we continue to fight with you is because you keep coming after us. And Valerian's like, okay, well, I'm going to turn him into the authorities. Everyone will know what he did. You guys are free to go do whatever you want. Here's your thing back because it's actually the source of power that they need to power their ship so they can go away and not be part of the City of a Thousand Planets anymore. So he gives them back the thing that the whole movie's revolved around. And they blast off and take off and go find their own new world. And I guess kind of live happily ever after. It's never really stated. Valerian reports back to the other generals that this general did all this war crime stuff and he's taken into custody. And Valerian and Lorelei finally kind of come to terms with their relationship and start to take it to a slightly more advanced level, but at the same time, she's still a little hesitant, but she learned that if he is willing to go through all that for her, maybe he's not such a bad guy after all, so she's starting to lighten up a little bit, but she's still resistant to his whole, proposal of marriage that he threw at her at one point. Overall, there's a lot going on in the movie that could have been better, but it seemed like they were trying to pack quite a bit into such a short period, which it wasn't even really short because the movie's 2 hours and 10 minutes long. But it didn't really feel like it was badly paced until the very end. And again, I think it's just because so much stuff was going on at that point. You're like, okay, how many more storylines are you going to try and introduce? Let's just get on with it, be done with it, whatever. Go, save it for a sequel. Possibly going to be a sequel. I don't know. I don't know how the book series went. They left it open and ambiguous to whether there'd be a sequel or not, because it doesn't really like sequel bait, but at the same time, obviously there's still going to be more adventures of Valerian that can go on throughout a series. But yeah, it was kind of long, but not badly paced. It just seems like it should have had a little bit more structure, and they could have trimmed a lot more fat out of this and probably cut down the runtime a little bit. And it did have some issues with character development, like some of the characters just seemed repetitive and stale, where other characters that were interesting were just kind of introduced just to be quickly killed off and not really amount to anything in the story. So what would I give it overall as far as a star rating? Well, I really have to think of whether or not I enjoyed this film more than The Dark Tower or not. And honestly, I think they're kind of on even ground at this point. Like I said, Valerian, there was a lot going on that needed to be reined in and could have cut down the runtime a bit. The Dark Tower seemed like they crammed a lot of non-story into a short amount of time, where had they taken the longer time to develop, probably would have been a better movie. So they kind of fall into the same ground. I'd say I was less bored watching Valerian, but at the same time it has so many issues with it that I don't think I can rate it higher than The Dark Tower. So I think for this one I'm also going to give it a 2, but between the two I'd say I like this one better. So it's closer to a 2.5, but I just can't justify moving it up above The Dark Tower. So that's it for this episode. Again, as always, thank you guys for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, share the video. Links are down in the description. Remember to click the bell up there in the corner or wherever it's at on the screen now, so you get notifications every time I post new content.